Greetings, Cap fans, and welcome to episode 3 of Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast. I am your host, Rick Verbanis, and I am joined by my partner, Bob Lucius.
Hey, everyone. Great to be here.
Yes, we got a lot to cover today. This is a fun, and I use that word carefully because it was a really fun story, and this is the Bloodstone Hunt in Captain America Regular Series, Volume 1, which took place between issues 357 and 362, and it was a fun story. So obviously there's 6 parts to this, so we got a lot to cover. So we'll go ahead and get this rolling.
All right, let's go.
All right, so I will start by saying that the issue 357, which is part 1, does have the majority of the story. Is like the 17 pages, I think it was, is part 2 of a previous story that was about Cap being a teenager, going in and looking for a missing teen with the Sisters of Sin, and it was drawn by Al Milgrom. So we're not going to get into that. We're just going to get right into the Bloodstone Hunt, and which is interesting because the last 10 pages of this issue are this story, and it starts with prologue, which, you don't expect to see that at the end of a story, but it is the prologue to the Bloodstone Hunt. So we kick the story off, and it's these 3 shadowy figures, right? They're breaking in to this museum and overpower a guard and steal this huge crate. And they go ahead and we see that it is Batroc the Leaper, it is Machete, and it is Zoran. Now, for those who don't know these characters, Batroc the Leaper, he's been around forever, right? He was first introduced in Tales of Suspense number 75 back in 1966. Yeah. He has been a thorn in Cap's side for quite some time, and he actually had a small role in the Captain America Winter Soldier movie in the very beginning. So he's been around. You probably know him. But who are these other 2 characters? Well, Maximilian Zoran, he was first introduced in Shang-Chi number 77, who, by the way, the artist on that book was Mike Zeck, so he was co-creator of Zoran. And he is a UK former British secret intelligence officer who is a master of weapons. So you have him. And then the other character is Machete, who is Ferdinand Lopez. He is a revolutionary from San Diablo, a country in South America. And so actually these 2 characters worked with Batroc to become Batroc's Brigade in Captain America 302, 303, 304. And that back then, the 3 of them were trying to steal Captain America's shield. So here they are, once again, showing up in the pages of Captain America. So they grab this crate, and they get into this truck. And as they're pulling away, there's this figure on the top of the truck, and we don't know who it is. We might kind of know who it is because who else wears a pink costume? There's really not much going on there. But anyway, so they go to the Silverman Funeral Home, drop off the crate, and there enough is Baron Zemo waiting for him. And not just any Baron Zemo. This is Baron Helmet Zemo, which is the 13th Baron Zemo, the same guy who was introduced in Cap 168, who is the son of the Zemo that fought Steve in World War II. So here he is, Baron Helmet Zemo, also sometimes referred to as Zemo 2. And they open up the crate and they see a skeleton. And he's so excited. He's like, Ja, this is it, the skeleton of Ulysses Bloodstone. And it's a nice splash page, right? And right there, there's the logo. I mean, this is a big story, Bob, when the story itself has its own logo. And it did. It had the Bloodstone Hunt logo. And this is also the same thing that draped across the Captain America logo on the front of the cover for these 6 issues. So you could tell right away this was a story that was, a little different from everything else.
Yeah, I mean that's true. It's funny when you look at that, and as you said, not a lot of story arcs have their own logo, but they were really building up to this one.
Yeah, and if I could go back to that cover, right? The other thing that changed with this particular issue on the cover was not only the Bloodstone Hunt Part 1 of 6, but in the corner box, we have a new logo, right? Before we had Kieran Dwyer with a very bulky Cap kind of running with his shield with a smile on his face. And but this one has Cap in a kind of a shadowy look, and behind him is Rachel, also known as Diamondback.
Yes.
And even better,
even better.
above her is a heart with a little tear in it. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Now I gotta tell you, this came out just as I was shipping off to the Marine Corps, after college and embarking on so I didn't read this at the time, but I'm really curious what readers at the time thought of that new box up there in the corner with the little broken heart. How that went over. Yeah.
You bring up a good point. Yeah, I remember seeing it and being like, what's going on here? Because Diamondback, she was introduced in issue 310, and that was, a few years previously when she was with the Serpent Society, and we knew very early on in that issue she was very smitten with Captain America. So yeah, it was really. But you bring up a good point about what was going on during that time, because this is 1989. So maybe we need to set the scene a little bit here of what was going through people's minds in 1989. Like, what were the big stories back then to kind of set the stage for this story and how it would play out.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, what was that? That was about 2 years into the Elder Bush's administration. So there's a lot going on in the world. We know that, right? I mean, this was the beginning of the fall of the Soviet Union. That started with the revolutions in all the Eastern European bloc countries like Poland and Romania. That eventually would end up with the fall of the Soviet Union in '91. So geopolitically, there's a lot going on. But what else? I mean, I don't know.
Well, I will tell you, which was big for me as a comic book fan back in 1989, and I think a lot of our listeners, the number one grossing movie in 1989 was Batman.
Oh, Batman.
And, Michael Keaton, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm Batman, right?
Batman.
So that was huge. But the other thing too, that was really big back there movie-wise, the number 2 grossing movie was Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Okay.
So I think with that being said, I think, this story had a little bit of an Indiana Jones feel to it, right?
It had a lot of it.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. So we get back to the splash page. We see that it's Ulysses Bloodstone, and Baron Zemo is so excited. And then next thing you know, the next panel coming in is this character that and he comes from behind this drape, if you will, and it's a dwarf with a all white 3-piece suit, wearing sunglasses, a chain, goatee, very stylish looking guy. And Batroc's like, "Who's this?" And Zemo says, "This is my associate, Tristram McRobber. He is a psycho detective." And then he goes and he puts his hand on the skeleton, and then we get a backstory of Ulysses Bloodstone. So we hear that he was back in the caveman days. He's been around that long, but then a meteorite comes, and there's an alien, and there's a stone. He gets the stone. He shatters it with his spear. It ends up embedding onto his chest, and which gives him this ability to be immortal. And then he through the centuries, he stalks and he slays monsters. So that's the character. Then part of the story is that the stone shatters, and Ulysses Bloodstone is collapsing, and then it's taken away by the custody. And Zemo's like, "And the gems? What of the gems?" Well, they vanished. So that's how we get introduced to Ulysses Bloodstone.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'll be honest with you. The first time I read through this was several years ago, and picked it up again. And I got a little curious about old Ulysses, and I was surprised. I thought this was possibly an invention by Drew, but in fact, the character of Ulysses Bloodstone goes back quite a ways. So,
Yep.
I mean, the first appearance was back in Strange Tales 73, and that was a bit of a retcon appearance, and you wouldn't know it from reading the story that it was this guy. But he was also in Marvel Presents #1 and #2, which basically told his backstory, which you just sort of summarized, and which is summarized in a little bit more depth in this first issue of the Bloodstone Hunt. So he's been around some time, and then he died in Rampaging Hulk #8 back in 1978. So that's where he met his end, and that's where this story sort of picks up many years later.
So the story picks up, and we find that the character that was on top of the truck is Diamondback, and she's been spying on them this entire time, trying to hear what's going on. And Zaran basically finds out that she's spying, and they fight, and she's doing okay. She's doing okay for an Olympic-style gymnast with some fake diamonds, but out of nowhere, Batroc comes and he knocks her out. Then, of course, he's like, "Oh my, it is a woman. Oh, 1,000 pardons, mademoiselle." Right? And apologies to to all my French friends and my bad Batroc the Leaper accent. So they capture her, and then we already know that these guys, Batroc's Brigade, they're not very good, right? They're not respectable people. They've already practically killed a guard. Now we've got Machete. When Batroc says, what should we do with her? Machete's like, I know what I'd like to do with her. I mean, these are not good guys, right?
Yeah. So these are racy comics back in the day. So.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, these were racy. I mean, so at one point they take Diamondback and they throw her in with the skeleton and lock her up, and Machete's like, such a waste. I mean, like, wow, okay. So then they take a part of the skeleton off, like a rib cage, and it's now their divining rod, which is going to allow them to look for these segments, these pieces of the Bloodstone that are all over the world, and now it's a race to find the Bloodstones. And then it ends with the box that Rachel and the skeleton are in, and it says, a half an hour later, the makeshift coffin is thrown down a deep, dark pit. It falls for over a minute. That's pretty deep. And to be continued in part 2 of the Bloodstone Hunt, the Catacombs. So that gets us to our next issue, and we're rolling along here. And it's got a great cover. Love the cover, right? This cover, totally Indiana Jones. It's the cover of 358, and it's Captain America, who is in it looks like a cave of some sort, but the walls are coming in on them, and they have spikes up top and they have spikes down below. And the starburst says, to rescue Diamondback, Cap enters the caverns of death. And it looks pretty daunting for our hero here. So it starts off with, and by the way, I want to give credit where credit is due, right? So let's talk about the team that's involved on this. So Mark Gruenwald's the writer. Of course, he's been the writer for quite some time at this point. And Kieran Dwyer is the penciler. But this is the first time. Now, Kieran started in Cap with, I want to say issue 338, which was, let's say, 20 issues before, right? So they've had some time together, him being the penciler. But now, this is the first time I'm noticing that Kieran Dwyer is listed as a co-plotter. And so Mark is working hand in hand. And let's also back up a little bit here too, Bob. So these 6 issues came out over the course of 3 months, and they were bi-weekly, right? And so they started at cover dates of September, October, November, which means that they probably came out in July, August, September. So this was their annual, or beginning of their annual bi-weekly issues. And one of the things they did to make sure that the artists were on time and they didn't have to like switch artists was they have backup stories, right? So the first 17 pages were Kieran Dwyer, and the backup pages were a completely different story, which we're not going to get into. We don't have time today, but it's about U.S. Agent and his hunting Scourge. And that was done by artist of Mark Bright. So anyway, that's the credit. And I just want to say that Danny Belandi was the inker for him. And I like Belandi on Kieran Dwyer. I think he does a really nice job. So that's where the credit is due. All right, so the title of this story is Bones of Contention. And we get Cap coming down a rope into a cavern with his flashlight, and with all the stalagmites and everything all around him. So it already has a pretty cool feel. And then he sees skeletons of some people, and actually it looks like they were the creatures that work with the mole man. And so he steps in the wrong place, very much a Indiana Jones type move. And next thing you know, all these spikes start flying at him, and he's getting hit, but his shield takes some. His acrobatic moves kind of get him out of harm's way. But of course, where he lands, it opens up underneath him, and it goes into a lava pit, right? So then he has to jump for it, and as he jumps for it, more spikes come out. So he gets hurt there, and he's climbing up these spikes. And then as he comes out of that, there's another booby trap, and a wall comes down which has spikes on it, and he has to get underneath it very quickly. And then another one, and then he's in a place where the walls start coming in, and they have spikes. And he works his way out of this. But this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages of traps that he has to get through, a la Indiana Jones. I don't know about you, but this was a great way to just grab the reader, right? Just pull you in, right?
Yeah, I don't know how many young kids who read this at the time sort of play acted those scenarios, in their bedroom and in their house, replicating, trying to replicate all those maneuvers and obstacles. And so, yeah, it's a great several pages of just quintessential Cap acrobatics and problem solving. Yes. And I love being able to find out, what's in that little utility bag that he carries on his belt. So
yeah.
Turns out it's some tape and a blasting cap. So fortuitous.
Yes, he is they do call him the big Boy Scout. So he is prepared.
Right. Yeah.
So then he sees this deeper pit in some sort of cavern where there's again more skeletons, which seems to be an interesting story that I don't know if we ever get to. But yeah. But there is a deep, deep, dark pit. So He climbs down this rope, and at the very bottom, he sees this casket, and it's the one that Rachel's in. Now, by the way, I forgot to mention, sorry, he has been following a sensor, right? There's a homing device because Rachel had her homing device on, and so he's following all the way. He's following a device. He doesn't know who it is, right? So anyway, he opens up his Diamondback. He's like surprised. And she's like, "Oh, Cap, you got my signal. I've given up hope. Then I remember the transmitter I gave you. It feels like it's been days. Sorry if I smell." So anyway, so she gets into Cap's arm. So this she gave him the transmitter back in issue 344, if anybody's paying attention. So she tells a story about what she was doing following Batroc's Brigade, about the skeleton. And so he's like, okay, he takes the skull of Ulysses Bloodstone, and he's like, I can't take the whole skeleton, I'll just take the skull. And then they go ahead and they make it back up out of the pit. So that brings us to Avengers Island. Now, on Avengers Island, we get introduced to, Cap's, not introduced, we get to see Cap's team and get introduced to a new member on Cap's team. Fabian goes ahead and introduces about this new modified Quinjet. And then he introduces him to a pilot by the name of Colonel John Jamison. And who is John Jamison, you ask? Well, that is
Jonah's loving son.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we get introduced to him. So then Cap starts reading up on Ulysses Bloodstone. we get a little bit of Rachel sitting in the background, pining over him. And she's just got her hands, just leaned over like a little schoolgirl. It's funny. And she's like, this is fabulous, sitting here in Cap's private office, helping him work.
Hell, that's just how I'd look if I was there. Right?
I know, right? We'd all have schoolboy crushes on it.
Yeah.
So Fabian went ahead and turned the skull into, because it's giving off some weird energy, right? So he turns it into being able to be their own tracking device, if you will, for the stones. So now there is a race on, right? We've got Zemo and his crew looking for the stones, and now it's Cap. And so Rachel follows after him. And again, a little racy. As they're running to the airstrip, she's running behind him, and in her thought bubble, look at that tushy move.
It's America's ass, right? I mean,
yeah, exactly. Even back then, that was America's ass. Anyway, so Diamondback wants to go with him, and he's like, Diamondback, before I let you tag along, I want you to promise there won't be any funny business like last time we worked together. And she's like, Scout's honor. And so that was in issue 319. And in case you didn't know what happened then, so she, again, back then she was pining for him, right? And they get into her airship. While she's in the air, she takes the key out of the ignition and puts it down her shirt and says, Cap, unless you give me a kiss, we're going to crash. And of course, Cap calls her on a bluff. And so she safely lands the plane. But he said, nope, I can't work with people I don't trust. And he leaves. So that's the funny business, in case anybody was wondering. So they take off in this new hyped up Quinjet that John Jameson is flying. And he's now a pilot working with the Avengers, specifically Cap. So they go ahead, they follow the signal from the skull, and they get just south of the equator where the Amazon River is. So they're in the jungle, and they parachute into the jungle. And unfortunately, Diamondback, she lied. She never really done this before, and so she didn't land very well. And she's caught up in the trees, and her costume is conveniently ripped all over. So she has some rip, and apparently she doesn't wear a bra. Because there's some skin showing here and there. By the way, that's a little, I think, fan service that Kieran Dwyer did, and so that's throughout the rest of the story. So next thing you know, they're surrounded by these Incas, this long lost tribe of Incas, a la Indiana Jones. And they have their spears, and Cap's like, all right, we're not going to fight. Let's just go to where they take us. And they go to this pyramid, right? And they get in there, and sure enough, over this pit, they have, it looks like they're doing some sort of sacrifice, but they don't know what it is. They show down on this pit, there's this circle, and it's like this huge circle, and there we find our 4 enemies bolted to this circle with all their heads kind of in the middle of where, like, the, if you will, the bullseye would be, and their legs are going out. So there's Zemo, there's Batroc, there's Zoran, there's Machete. They're all there. By the way, Bob, conveniently enough, there's space for 2 more.
Space for 2 more.
Yep. And so just before Cap and Diamondback can do anything, the Incas behind them use their little blow darts with some poison and hit them in the back of the neck. So that is the end of that story.
What a cliffhanger.
It is. And that's a great point, because these have been starting off with like gangbuster action and each end with a cliffhanger. And you know what I like about this too, Bob, is that the cover of the next issue is the cliffhanger from the previous one. Yeah. So it is and it says on the cover here, right? Now we've got all 6 of them bolted on this, and you see all these spears pointed at them, and it's Cap, Baron Zemo, Machete, Batroc, Zoran, Diamondback, trapped. The Wheel of Death, which happens to be the name of the story. So we go back into this, and by the way, just want to point out that Bob Sharon is now the new colorist on this, taking over for the previous colors. So Bob's back after a little bit of a hiatus. Anyway, so we get the story. They've been tagged with these blow darts, and Cap's trying to fight the poison, and he's trying to get his heartbeat and his blood pumping faster. So he's working on that to try to get this poison out of his system. And sure enough, right when everybody is supposed to throw their spears at Cap and the other captives here, Cap breaks free, grabs a spear, and takes that spear and knocks down all the other spears, like kind of like in a batting motion, right? And getting all the others. So, and he catches a few more. He breaks himself out. He throws the spear, blunt end, not tip end, blunt end first at the head Inca, and anyway, he gets them free, and he's fighting. He's still fighting off the poison, right? But he says, and he doesn't have a shield, so he's fighting with spears. But he ends up besting everybody, and then when he looks, the only person left still down there is Diamondback. The other four guys, I should say, went ahead and left. So Cap grabs Diamondback, and they head off. John's there with his Quinjet to take them, via a swinging ladder, and a very dramatic escape as the Incas are there and shooting at him.
Hot pursuit.
Yes, very much Indiana Jones. Now, I would just say that there is a shadow of a character we are now introduced to in the corner, and it's someone watching everybody get away, and all we see is a thought bubble, and it says, "Aw, ain't that a shame?" Well, who's that guy?
Who could it possibly be, Rick?
We don't know.
We don't know.
We do not know.
You just have to wait and see.
Yes. So they fly off. Now, Baron Zemo also flies off. And I have to say, he's in here, and he's talking with the Batroc's Brigade as well as the Clairvoyant. And he's saying to him, why did you not warn us about this? He says, well, I'm a clairvoyant, not a precognitive. I read the present, not the future. So, okay, that explains that. They do find that they do have two of the stones, while the Cap doesn't have any. So they decide to then go off to follow for the next one, which, guess where it is? Bermuda Triangle. So they leave the jungle to go to the Bermuda Triangle. So it's quite the adventure. So Cap and Diamondback go diving into the water. Cap's like, Diamondback, why don't you go to the other boats and see if you can find them? And he kind of maybe sends her on a little bit of a fool's errand. So she dives in. She gets onto a boat, and again, a little racy. There is a woman lying face down, topless, in a bikini. So then she, sits up and puts her bikini top on. And the owner of the boat, we assume, he comes over and he's like, well, what can I do for you, miss? So Diamondback puts on the tears and acting, and she's like, oh, I can't find my boat. I must have gotten on the wrong one. Can you help me? And so, of course, they help. Now, so Cap's swimming. And by the way, he has not just his swashbuckler boots on, but he has his cap flippers. He's got red cap flippers.
Yeah. Very
convenient. I gotta say, he is a magnificent swimmer with that shield of his.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of water resistance against that shield, but it doesn't slow him down.
No, not at all. So he gets to this plane, this airliner that crashed in Bermuda Triangle years ago, and so the skullometer, as he calls it, the skullometer, finds that there's something inside there. So he goes, but sure enough, Zemo's crew was already there. So there's Batroc and his machete and Zoran. They come out and they start fighting. And so Batroc leaves to Machete and Zoran to fight. And so they're fighting at him with a spear gun and a machete. And next thing you know, Batroc is swimming up and he comes across a really big shark, like a big shark, right? And so he shoots him with the spear gun, but oh no, that drew the attention of, it looks like 7, 8, 9 more sharks. So he now swims back to where Cap and the other guys are wrestling. And that is the end of this issue. Next, Sea of Blood.
No, I mean, this is, I think of all of the action set pieces in this Bloodstone hunt, I think I think my favorite is the underwater sequence.
Because we don't see Cap normally underwater. So
right.
this put him in a new element.
Yeah. And, it's 3 against 1. And, you got to throw in 7, 8, 9, 10, maybe a dozen sharks on top of that. So it's.
Yeah, had a little bit of a James Bond feel to it,
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
So we're now hitting some other genres as well. All these action adventure genres. So part 4 we've got of the Bloodstone hunt. And now on the cover, it says, even if Cap manages to beat Batroc, Zoran, and Machete, can he survive the deadly jaws of frenzied sharks? And you see some sharks on at least one big shark on the cover. Again, cliffhanger ends, cover picks up where the cliffhanger ends. I like that. I like that a lot. So we have, again, Mark Grunwald, Kieran Dwyer, Danny Belandi, Bob Sharon on colors. So this is part 4, Blood in the Sea. So they're wrestling underwater, and Cap notices the sharks. He tries to get Zoran to notice. They notice, and they start to go back into the airline, the sunken airline, and Cap's kind of left there by himself fighting the sharks. So he eventually gets himself in there, but he can't get into the cockpit because the three bad guys close the door, and they're like, oh well. So Cap even says, come on, you guys, cut me a little slack. Well, he thinks it anyway, right? And so he's fighting the sharks. He comes back out. Meanwhile, Diamondback is.
Oh, well, hold on, Rick, because I gotta call this panel out, because this is one of my favorite panels in the entire Bloodstone hunt.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just because I'm a big softy, but Cap doesn't like to kill. Whether it's man or beast. And, right before he goes into the airline and trying to get into the cockpit, he's kind of wrestling with some sharks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he decides he's got to put down one shark and hopefully use it as bait to draw off some of the other sharks. But before he does so, he apologizes to the shark and he says, sorry, Jaws, I know you were just looking for your next meal, same as everyone, but it was you or me. So, Cap doesn't take any life for granted, right? And he doesn't.
That's true.
He doesn't like to take any life if he doesn't have to, even if it's a deadly shark that's trying to eat him. And man, that's just so Cap.
It is, and that's another reason why we love the character of Steve Rogers. So there we have Rachel on this boat, and with some help from this guy and his reluctant female companion. She's got her binoculars. She comes across, because there's other boats in the bay, and she comes across Zemo. She sees Zemo. So she goes and she dives into the water, and she comes up on Zemo's boat and doesn't go unnoticed. Zemo sees it. He goes to draw his weapon. She's quick. She throws one of her patented throwing diamonds and kicks him, and she's got him. But his companion, Tristan McWhobber, is there with a machine gun, and she stops him, right? So she's holding her own. But meanwhile, back in the depths of the water, Cap is holding off on these sharks, and the 3 bad guys are in the cockpit looking up. And at this point, Batroc says, Captain is in the soup now. A pity so great a fighter must die. So then we cut back, and it's Diamondback is taking care of business with Zemo and McWhobber, and so she puts McWhobber down. So now we cut back to the water, and we see that the Batroc and his colleagues are getting back onto Zemo's boat, and they see that Rachel has Zemo with a gun to his head, saying, put your hands up high where I can see them. Now, who has the bloodstone fragment? And toss it to me. So they toss it. But Batroc's no fool, right? He tosses it so that Rachel has to reach for it, which gives Zaran an opening to throw one of his sais, gets her on the shoulder. She falls into the water with a sai in her shoulder, bleeding. And then they take off. The boat takes off, and Zemo says, "Wait a minute, that she stole the 2 fragments in the case while my back was turned." So Rachel, being a master thief, yeah. So Diamondback is discovered by Cap while he's in the water, and he rescues her. And again, the long ladder comes down from the Quinjet, and they fly away. And then we cut to see someone watching all this. It's the same shadowy figure that was in the jungle, and this time we see actually what this person looks like as he puts down his binoculars, and it's our introduction to Crossbones.
Right. I mean, they haven't introduced him yet, but retrospectively, we now know who this character is.
Yes. Yep. So that is, technically, this is known as his first appearance. So they're on the plane and the Quinjet, and Diamondback shows she did get some of the stones, 2 of the stones, and surely I deserve a kiss for that. Cap in his Cap way, he's like, Diamond. I was just kidding. Can't a girl make a joke around you? But anyway, so they fly off, and where's the next place they go off to? Right? They were in the jungle.
Yep.
They were in the Bermuda Triangle. Now they're off to ancient Egypt.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, this was really cool. Really well done by Kieran Dwyer. I love the, as they walk into the desert, there is a stairs leading down into a pit that's covered with sand. And it just had, I don't know, it makes for a really cool feel. And then in the next panel, you see Cap with his flashlight, with the big, strobe effect as he's going, and you see the hieroglyphics on the walls of the inside of this cave. So Cap, shows that he's a little worried about Diamondback, because he's like, look, if your injuries start to bother you, let me know. I'll send you back to the ship. But she's like, no way. I don't want him to think I'm a wimp, because she wants him to. She's trying to prove herself to Cap.
She's trying hard, yeah.
So they're walking, and apparently it's a universal thing. It's a universal.
Yeah, every Egyptian temple has
right?
one of these.
Yes, because there's a trapdoor that opens up, and underneath they're falling, and there are all these snakes, and there's even a hairy tarantula and a scorpion, right? So it's to be continued.
Yeah.
But Bob, do I have to tell you, on the next cover, it's them falling into the pit.
Yeah, I mean it's a classic call out, right, to Raiders of the Lost Ark,
right?
And yeah. I hate snakes.
Yes. Why did it have to be snakes?
Why did it have to be snakes? Awesome.
Yep. Into the lair of the living mummy. We open up, big splash panel. They're falling. There they are. It's lair of the living mummy. And sure enough, we have the snakes, the tarantula, the scorpion. There's even a big beetle.
There's a big millipede. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
so
that's
scary stuff.
Not Diamondback's best look on the cover, but it's scary. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, she looks terrified. And Cap looks a little concerned too.
Yeah, he does.
So they're falling, and Cap lands first and catches Diamondback, and he takes her, and kind of with that momentum, because his feet crouch, he then jumps and throws her up, and she lands. Now remember, her shoulder got stabbed, so she's really in a lot of pain there. But she made it, and she's pulling herself up. And Cap's like, okay, my micro chainmail uniform seems to be proof against most of these critters' bites and stings, but there's bound to be a few worn spots here and there. Well, you know where that worn spot must have been, Bob?
Where's
I'll
that?
tell you. That would be in the back of his neck where a Inca blow dart hit.
Yeah.
Right. So apparently a chainmail good as like, I think they almost like Mark had to write this here. He had to be like, oh, there's bound to be a few worn spots here and there, because I think we'd all kind of guess, okay, so sure, a snake fangs can't get through, but a little Inca blow dart.
Blow dart. Yeah. Time for a tune-up on the micro chainmail.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Cap jumps up and he grabs Rachel's arm, but she, from the pain, she dislocates, because he weighs like 240 pounds, right? Yeah. So he dislocates her shoulder, and so she screams in pain. He gets up, he pops it back in, but she passes out from the pain. So he gets his shield dislodged, and he's working on that. He turns around, Diamond's gone. Where'd she go? She's gone. So we cut to the next page, and there's Zemo and his crew are flying in, and Zemo dispatches Batroc and his colleagues to go in there, but they kind of figure that Cap's already beat them to it, so they're laying an ambush. So we go back inside the tomb. Cap's looking around. He comes across a shred of old cloth, like a mummy wrapping, and he spends like a half an hour trying to find a secret entrance, because he realizes she didn't go anywhere. And so he spends quite some time looking, and he finds an outline, and he gets in there, and he sees this huge mummy over top of Diamondback, who's laying on this stone table, if you will.
Yeah, ritual table, yeah.
And so the mummy just like knocks Cap for a loop. And he's like, wow, it's a super mummy. So he's fighting, and he gets a little bit of a break. He comes over to check to make sure that Rachel's doing okay, and he notices like a leaf on her wound, and he's like, was he trying to help her or what? So they continue fighting. Eventually, Diamond wakes up, so he takes his shield and he hits the mummy right in the throat, which is enough to kind of break free from his grips. And Cap's like, Diamond, are you all right? And she's like, I feel great, Cap. No pain in your shoulder? None. So you were trying to help. Why? And so the mummy starts to try to talk, but Cap doesn't understand what the mummy's saying. But guess who does? That would be Rachel, because her teammate in the Serpent Society, Asp, is from Egypt and knows the language. So she got acquainted with the language. So, yeah.
Not the easiest language to pick up, but, she can be a smart cookie.
Apparently.
Yeah.
So they're talking, and convinces the mummy to give the stone to Cap. In return, Cap says he will, once he gets all 5 fragments, he will return to try to restore the mummy. And the mummy, via translation from Rachel, says, he just said that if you're lying to him, he will spend the rest of his immortal life hunting you down. And what does Cap say?
Yeah, I love it, Rick.
Tell him I never lie.
Yeah, there you go.
Right?
That's the stuff.
Yes, that's the Steve we know and love. And by the way, a little side note, I didn't know that this mummy was an actual character, right? Even though on the cover it says the living mummy. The living mummy is a character. I didn't know that back in 1989 when I was reading this.
Yeah.
But the living mummy, I think his real name is Cantu, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the living mummy's been around for a while. He actually has been part of the Howling Commandos with some other creatures, and the Legion of Monsters. So interesting that Mark Gruenwald brought this character into his story.
Yeah.
So the Zemo and flies off and talking about the incompetence, that why can't they do anything, and here's a tender side of Zemo we never see.
I know, you don't see this very often. It doesn't last very long, but yeah.
Yeah. So there's McWhobber on a couch, and Zemo is getting him some water, giving him something to drink. He's bandaged him up, but chances are it's just basically because he needs him, right?
Yeah.
Because he had a concussion, and then McWhobber wakes up and he says, "I had a vision, Zemo. Someone else wants the Bloodstones. 2 others." And Zemo's like, "Who?" Of course, the guy faints. So then we get back to remember John Jameson? So he's been hovering, right? He's circling, he's flying around, waiting for Cap's signal. And as he's sitting there, he sees that there are the two Bloodstones that are there, and he starts to get a little antsy. "Something about them fascinates me," he says, "as if I can't guess what. Reminds me of the Moonstone I once wore, that once wore me, when Colonel Jameson became the savage man-beast the world came to know as the Man-Wolf. Got to put these away. Stop playing with them. The Moonstone is gone. That part of life is all behind me." Or is it? There's a little foreshadowing for the Cap Wolf saga that comes later on in Mark Grumel's stories. But we do see in the background Crossbones' mask. So apparently Crossbones is on the Quinjet.
Hiding in the shadows.
Yep. So Cap and Diamondback, they leave. They get ambushed. They beat the ambush, and they once again get onto the flying ladder that is from the Quinjet, and they're on it, but it gets shot by Zemo's aircraft. He's got his guns, and part of it is shot, so he's dangling, and next thing you know, it's ending. And this is the one point where it doesn't go to that cliffhanger on the cover of the next issue. But the next cover, it says, it says, "At last, the harrowing end of the hunt, Zemo ascended." And there's this white figure with energy floating in the air, and you got Cap and Batroc and Machete and Diamondback, and for the first time ever, Crossbones on the cover. Mm-hmm. And what's the name of this particular story? Necromancing the Stone. It's funny, as I was rereading these, Bob, I of course it brings back Indiana Jones, right? Yeah. It has a huge feel that, but it also brought back Romancing the Stone.
Yeah, 1984.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah, Michael Douglas, actually, right?
Yes.
That was a pretty good flick.
So here they are, hanging by the shot-up ladder, and Diamondback and Cap, and it's a very precarious situation. Cap tells Diamondback to get behind her. John Jameson decides, look, I got to take evasive action. He just goes and boom, afterburners. Luckily, Cap and Diamondback hang on, and they get back onto the ship. And Cap's been shot and in the leg, and Cap's like, "So I have. Get me the first aid kit."
Just a flesh wound.
Yes, just a flesh wound. So they're talking about they gotta go find the 5th and final fragment, and nobody notices Crossbones lurking in the background. So Zemo and his crew get on their ship. Captain did drop one of the stones. Batroc was able to secure it in the desert. I'm sure that was easy. And McWhobber starts to wake up and reminds everybody someone else wants the stone, but he won't say who. So now they move off they're chasing the last stone, and they find themselves in Tokyo, right? So they went from the jungle. They went from the Bermuda Triangle. They went from the ancient Egypt to now Tokyo. And they actually, Batroc says something interesting here. He says, "I think you missed the significance of the 4 sites that Bloodstones secreted themselves. They all had in common were places of death. The Chamber of Conspiracy, the Incan Sacrifice Wheel, the Sunken Airline, and the Pharaoh's Tomb Wherever we find the fifth fragment, I wager we will also find a place of death. So they end up going into the back of this restaurant, and it looks like there's some sort of ceremony going on. And but the Machete says, "Oh, it's a bunch of waiters and busboys kneeling before a corpse." But they do have the bloodstone, and they're trying to, it looks like, raise someone from the dead. So now we're kind of getting an idea of what these stones may be able to do. So this crew of looks like 8 guys starts to attack our 3 villains, but they make short work of them, and they go to show, even once again, they're not good guys, right? I mean, they're definitely killing these other people. And when the elder puts the stone, swallows it, thinking that'll stop them, Machete just cuts it out, off panel, of course. And they come rushing out, and there's Cap standing in the alleyway with his long trench coat over his uniform, which was a very 1989 thing to do.
Uh-huh. And check out the hat, right? He's got like an Indiana Jones hat he's holding in his left hand.
He does, because that's how you do put a disguise on.
That's right.
You put a hat,
or you went on an adventure.
True.
Yeah.
So so at this point, Cap's saying, "Look, I've got some fragments. You got some fragments. Let's meet, and we'll negotiate." So Batroc's like, "Okay." Zemo says to do that, so sounds good. Do you give your word you will bring your bloodstone pieces? Cap says, "Of course, you have my word." I want to point out in the last panel, so you've got Diamondback, who's his backup, right? And she's on the top of this building looking down. And if you look at the panel, this is very clever of Kieran Dwyer. If you look at the panel, one of them says Simon. Like if you took the sign and it was upside down. So it says Simon, Simon. Mm-hmm. And then another one, if you turn it upside down, says Kirby. Simon and Kirby.
Yeah. I got to tell you, Rick, I never caught that until you just called it to my attention. So that's really pretty cool.
I can't take credit for catching that. I read a lot of notes.
That's awesome.
But I thought it was really interesting that they did a little
classy
tribute to the creators of Captain America.
Yeah, classy.
So Cap meets in the rendezvous. So he says, "Look, here are my terms. Surrender your 2 gems, or I blow up a block in downtown Tokyo." And it's like, okay, we got to figure this out. So in the meantime, Cap gets back on his ship to get the 2 bloodstones, but he finds John Jameson knocked out and the bloodstone's gone. So he comes back and he tells Zemo, "Look, I don't have them. I swear to you, Zemo, this isn't a trick. Somebody stole them." And before you know it, the transcendent coming out of Zemo's ship is his dad. And it says, "I live again." And he goes on to say, "I've been restored." And Zemo notices it doesn't sound like his father. And he says, "Let fire trumpet my return. Let the world tremble before the might of the hellfire helix." So it's not his dad.
Yeah, and he's got all those bloodstones embedded in his forehead.
Right. But he's possessing the body of his dad. But Helmut doesn't get this. He doesn't realize this. So at this point, Batroc, Machete, Zara, they're like, "Hey, this is more than we bargained for," and they run off.
Yeah.
Yep, they're out. And so Cap decides to try to stop this helix creature. So he goes to throw his shield, and nothing is happening. And in the meantime, Crossbones is fighting Diamondback, and he says, "What did you do? What made these gemstones, like bloodstones, fly from my fist?" And Diamondback doesn't know, so he knocks her out. And so basically, I guess when the bloodstones got close enough to each other, they formed one and went to the corpse, and the helix creature took over. So again, there's a long fight. They're trying to stop, but eventually, the the island, it appears like where they're at, starting to erupt from the power of the helix, and looks like volcanoes starting to pop up, lava and things like that. Cap's like, this may cost me my shield because it may fall in the lava, but it'll be worth it. And so he's going to toss one last time to try to take the skull off. And at the same time, Crossbones gets his weapon. He fires a bolt at the diamond and the bloodstone, and it shatters, right? And that's the end of that. And Zemo is falling into this pit, and Cap grabs him at the last second. He says, "Stop jerking around." And Zemo's like, "Let go of me. My father is down there. Father, here I come." And he falls into this pit. And Cap's like, "Crazy fool, throwing those away his life like that." Well, Zemo and the Bloodstone are gone, but that still leaves. And then Diamondback, "Where are you?" "She's not there. Odd, I could have sworn I saw someone throw or shoot from inside the ship at the same instant I whipped my shield at the Bloodstone creature. The day may have been saved, but 2 mysteries remain." And it says, "End?" ? And that, Bob, was the Bloodstone hunt. That was, and that's why I said in the beginning of this podcast, it was fun. I think it was a lot of fun.
It was action packed, and I gotta say, it wasn't that last couple pages, not Zemo's best moment.
Yeah,
he kind of lost his marbles there toward the end.
Yep, and he will come back in other forms, with the Thunderbolts and things like that. But as Mark Grunwald writes him, he is a little crazy. He's a little obsessed, thinking that Cap killed his father more than once.
Right.
For everybody who's listened during these 6 issues, I hope you had as much fun as we did talking about it. By all means, please go to the Captain America Comic Book Fans Facebook group and share your thoughts. Let us know what you think of the Bloodstone hunt. Let us know what you think of our take on the story, and provide us your feedback. And as always, we really appreciate if you subscribe on your favorite platform, leave us a review, and any support we certainly do appreciate, because we hope to keep doing these for you each week.
Yeah, and hey, and if there's any details that we missed, please let us know, because we're always looking to get more out of these stories. And every time we read them, we get something new, and I'm sure you do as well. And so be sure to share those with us.
Yeah, now speaking of next story we're going to cover, we're going to go to my sweet spot, Bob. We're going to go back into 1982, and it was issues 286 to 289, 4-part story that was by J.M. DeMatteis, Mike Zeck, John Beatty, and Bob Sharon. And it was the classic story of Deathlock.
The Demolisher.
Yes, Deathlock and Captain America.
Yeah.
And can't wait to cover that. That'll be a lot of fun in episode 4.
Yeah, I know that one has a lot of meaning for you, so that's going to be a great talk.
Yeah. And, and also for episode 4, we're going to have a special guest. We are going to have joining us the longtime colorist for Marvel. When I say long time, Bob, he's colored more than 1,500 Marvel comics.
That's a huge body of work, yeah.
Yes, that's Bob Sharon. So Bob Sharon will be joining us and in episode 4, and he's going to talk about his time with Cap and some other Marvel comics as well. So that'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, he's got some great stories to share, and I'm going to learn some stuff from him too, I bet.
Yep. Absolutely. All right, Bob, this has been a good time. So I appreciate everyone listening, and we look forward to talking with you next episode.
All right. Be well, everyone.